More than 100 years ago, American explorer A.R. Wallace wrote that he had discovered tribal sculptures along the banks of the Columbia River. 3 enormous ape-like heads carved in basalt. It was puzzling to Wallace, who knew that no primates had ever been discovered in North America. How do you know what a giant ape looks like? He asked the native artists. We know, they told Wallace, because we've seen them. This field recording is believed to be the warning call of Bigfoot. While investigators have largely concentrated on retrieving physical and photographic proof that the legendary creature is alive, audio recordings are now emerging as the best evidence. Most recently, this mysterious sound made headlines in Ohio. It is quite different from the aggressive shriek recorded more than 20 years ago in the state of Washington.
It's a very high-pitched, squealing, blood-curdling, make your hair stand on edge scream.
The sound was recorded by Chodish Katum Wichtelum, former police officer and elder of the Lummi tribe, which has a tradition of Sasquatch encounters. For them, the creature lives.
Our old people, like my grandmother, tell us stories about Siatko, Salmaquist. You people call him Sasquatch. They tell us if we run across him, not to look into his eyes, because he can steal your spirit. These are the legends the old people talk about.
In the American Indian tradition, all of the tribes of the coastal Northwest have a common belief about Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
James Swan is a naturalist and cultural historian who has studied the folklore of many tribes.
Modern Western culture jokes at Bigfoot, but in the Indian culture, Bigfoot is serious. This is a real being, a real creature with spiritual powers that lives in wild places. It's a guardian of sacred places, and it's not a joke at all.
All these people that seen him, who had an accidental run-in with him, all got affected the same. They went into shock.
In 1974, I went duck hunting in the evening about 6:15, 6:30, and I looked up, and this thing got out of the ditch, and I froze, and I got my knees started shaking, and that was Bigfoot. After that, I sold my guns, and I never did go hunting again. You know?
In the Lummi Nation, the oral tradition of tribal lore is now being written down by elders and tribal police. This is how we know that 1974 and 75 were banner years for Sasquatch encounters. According to records, there were over 1,000 reported sightings during that period, and Officer Chodish Katum took down most of them.
In 1975, I answered so many calls on him that people were making fun, saying that we were seeing things, that we were smoking dope, that we were drinking or something. There was no such thing. And the more they taunted about it, the more I wanted to prove there was such a thing without killing him. I did not want to kill this animal. I wanted to prove that he existed.
And on a chilly, moonlit night in 1975, Chodish Katum had his closest encounter of the beastly kind. It is an event burned in his memory.
November the 22nd, 1975, at 2 a.m., I received a prowler call at Emma Smith's residence on Scott Road. I was going north on Chief Martin Road, which is just off from the Scott Road. I could hear this screaming. I could see this thing running right toward my car. As it came into my bright light, I could see it was a Sasquatch. He had his mouth wide open, showing me all of his teeth. He was coming at me in an aggressive manner.
His radio was on, and police dispatch recorded the moment the aggressive creature confronted the officer. Sightings asked Michael D., the mammal curator for the Los Angeles Zoo, to render an opinion on the alleged Bigfoot recording.
I've heard it, and it's like nothing I've ever heard before. It's a noise, but whether or not an actual creature made that noise, I can't determine that. It doesn't sound like anything that I am familiar with, and I certainly am familiar with almost all the mammals that are in North America and their calls.
The source of this disturbing wail may never be known. No additional recordings have been made in the area since 1975, but those who have encountered the great primate know he will return.
He looks so human. Their facial features are so much like our own that it's almost like you say, where did you come from? What are you? I want to talk to you. I want to communicate. There's not a doubt in my mind that Sasquatch exists.
The Lummies are not the only indigenous people who believe in the reality of Bigfoot. In fact, every single tribe in the coastal Northwest from Alaska to California has a traditional belief.
Monsters. For most of us, they are the stuff of bedtime stories, campfire scares, and horror movies, not real life. Or are they? Is it possible that the monsters of legend might just turn out to be terrifyingly real?
Are there objective origins for monsters? Possibly. I happen to be one of those who think that myths and folk tales and legends do not come totally out of nothing. They're usually triggered by something, an attempt to explain something.
What if the creatures we consider to be monstrous are nothing more than undiscovered species of animals? Cryptozoology, a fringe element of mainstream zoology, deals with just such concerns. Derived from the Latin, the word means the study of hidden animals.
Cryptozoology is the evaluation of evidence for animals that are reported that have not been scientifically verified or validated. That is, animals that are known to us through eyewitness reports or folklore.
Cryptozoology is an intellectual pursuit for the curious. There are no schools for cryptozoologists, nor degrees to be earned. The man considered the father of cryptozoology is French zoologist Bernard Heuvelmans. His landmark book on the track of unknown animals was first published in 1955. It discussed the existence of animals both mundane, like the giant anaconda, and more exotic, like the abominable snowman of the Himalayas. The book inspired adventurers and scientists alike to seek out some of these hidden animals.
So the scholarly way he went about things was able to impress many other scientists that said, well, gee, maybe there is something to this after all.
Time and time again in the last century, animals that were thought to exist only as myth or in folklore were discovered to be real. The giant panda, the okapi, and the megamouth shark are only a few of the larger ones found. In investigating accounts that seem impossible, the cryptozoologists have helped to expand the known animal kingdom.
Cryptozoological claims should really be looked at in the same way as any other scientific claim. You've got to remember things like the giant squid were fantasy for many, many years until a specimen turned up.
If the giant squid can turn out to be real, what about other creatures of legend? Are real monsters simply undiscovered animals? The forest of the Pacific Northwest covers some 50,000 square miles of land. Here, dense wilderness rubs
Very rapidly.
People have told stories about Bigfoot for hundreds of years, but it will take more than that to prove that Bigfoot is not just a legend.
The burden of proof always lies with the person who is making the extraordinary claim. If you're making a claim about something that has never been seen before and there is no evidence of, it is incumbent upon you to produce evidence to convince other people.
Early evidence of the Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, comes to us from the folklore of the indigenous peoples of North America.
Well, the fact that we have Native American legends of a creature called Sasquatch and other names in various other dialects does lend credence to the possibility that there's something there, because if it's there, it's been there for a long, long time.
Robert Ostman claimed in a sworn affidavit to have been held captive by a family of Bigfoots in 1924. But the creature we know as Bigfoot leaps into the modern era when, in 1958,
and recordings of howls and bellows.
Perhaps the most interesting evidence for the existence of Bigfoot, the image of the Bigfoot, is indelibly etched in our minds.
If the Patterson film is real, and here this is with a very, very big qualified if, it is one of the most important scientific documents of the last 100 years.
But evidence for the existence of Bigfoot is not restricted to North America. Similar creatures are reported across the world, often in the remote mountainous areas. The most famous is the Yeti, or abominable snowman, of the Himalayas.
I certainly don't discount it as an anthropologist, that we may have some distant cousins lurking around in the more inaccessible parts of the planet.
Although modern humans, Homo sapiens, were preceded by other hominid groups, we seem to stand alone in the animal kingdom as the only representative of our species. Or are we?
And that's one reason why the possibility that Bigfoot, the Yeti, the rest of these creatures may exist is that from a purely biological standpoint, really they ought to be there.
Doubt as to whether our North American Bigfoot is a Gigantopithecus, or even if it exists at all.
Although I'm convinced that the Native American peoples brought a racial memory and legends of creatures like Gigantopithecus with them when they came across from Central Asia, there is no zoological evidence whatsoever that the animals themselves came across with them.
When we return, the Patterson film goes under the microscope, and a man...
Life away from this thing, absolutely. It was the scariest thing I've ever come up against.
In the spring of 2000, a museum in Northern California opened an entire wing devoted exclusively to Bigfoot, which quickly became its most popular exhibit.
In on the elusive creature, what they...
You have the experience, you can't appreciate where an actual eyewitness comes from and the trauma that they go through during this thing, even if it was hoaxed against them. The trauma that you live with day by day, and for 5 years that haunted me, caused me to lose sleep, and so
they're looking at.
What I saw out there, to me, was real. And what I experienced was real, and the terror I felt was real. And that part of it, beyond, outside the box, was real. And there's nobody that's going to tell me different on that.
If footprints, film evidence, and eyewitness testimony are not enough to convince the scientific community that Bigfoot is indeed a real monster, is there anything that will?
We don't have a body. I mean, if these things are out there and running around for as long as people say they have been, we ought to be able to find a dead one at some point. We haven't found it yet, and I don't think we're going to.
Most animals, when they die, they're never found. When animals die, they get eaten, the meat gets eaten, the bones get dispersed. The idea of finding bones is really a straw man.
Is Bigfoot a legend, or is it a real monster? Even more traditional academics debate this question.
I know that what we make of Bigfoot and what we make of our interest in Bigfoot are themselves very real, whether or not there really is a Bigfoot.
Little known but perfectly mundane creatures to be misidentified as real monsters. Prior to its discovery in 1902, the mountain gorilla of eastern Africa was thought to be a purely fictitious monster, a figment of the natives' overactive imagination.
Well, the discovery of the mountain gorilla was in many ways an accident. That is, no one was actually deliberately searching for mountain gorillas.
In 1902, a captain in the German army, Oskar von Behring, is on a routine patrol along the disputed border between German East Africa and the Belgian Congo. The route takes Behring across some volcanic mountains called the Virungas. At one point, he spots a group of what looks like to him huge, hairy, human-like creatures.
Captain von Behring actually shot a couple of specimens of the mountain gorilla, the first one of which pitched down a chasm in the jungle and fell away into the undergrowth and was completely lost.
And he managed to retrieve one of them and ship it back to Germany, where a taxonomist and scientist, or naturalist as they were called then, went to work on it basically, and it was then properly classified as a new kind of gorilla, namely a mountain gorilla.
What Captain von Behring has stumbled upon will bring to light a species of animal previously thought to be local folklore. Tales of an enormous animal with ferocious strengths and appetites.
There were even tales of these apes lurking near travel routes and then ambushing travelers along the way, and again, once again, abducting young women or killing the passengers.
Both the mountain gorilla and the lowland gorilla were said to carry off native girls and rape them. They were also said to fight with elephants using trees as clubs, both of which are nonsense. We know that the gorilla is quite a placid creature unless provoked.
I suppose if I were a missionary and had no knowledge of apes and by accident ran into a gorilla, my first thought would be monster.
The stories of mountain gorillas coming out of the jungle to abduct young maidens are incorporated into the 1933 film classic King Kong.
This gigantic ape has a love interest. The writer of King Kong relied on the available myths, the stories that were available about the apes, about the interaction between apes and humans, about certainly the potential interest on the part of the apes in human females.
Native knowledge of the animals in their environment is, for the most part, disregarded by white colonials, even though the natives have lived alongside the mountain gorilla for years.
And the creatures they were describing couldn't possibly exist because the naturalists didn't know about them. And sadly, that is a view that prevails to today. A lot of scientists will not believe in anything that they can't have on their dissecting tables.
Cryptozoologists are confident that the evidence of real monsters in our midst will continue to grow. More often than not, however, they say, that same evidence is ignored by the scientific establishment.
There's actually very few scientists now at all looking for new species. And trying to look for large new species is considered often practically eccentric.
Eccentric or not, there will always be people who search the shadows for Bigfoot.
I don't know that I'd be happy if any of these monsters would turn out to be real. It would take away some of the mystery that adheres to the very figure of the monster. I don't think a monster is all that monstrous once it's scientific fact.
I think that mankind has a need to fear, and as the world gets more and more explained within terms of rational scientific viewpoints, mankind needs to have monsters. It needs to have something to be afraid of.
The fact is that there are still monsters in the 21st century. It doesn't really matter if we need them or not. They're there, and it's a matter of fact.
As late as August 2000, an alleged Bigfoot sighting was being investigated in Louisiana, and the skeletal remains of a strange animal thought to be the chupacabras was examined at the University of Nicaragua at Leon. Scientists there determined the animal was a wild dog. But the fact that science is taking a hard look at what we call monsters tells us that some legends might be true.